Well, now, if you know anything about me, you know that I'm not that into Euro games. I certainly have not reviewed very many of them at all. Although I think you'd probably, as a subscriber or viewer of my videos, you'd probably be surprised by how many Euro games I have actually played. The problem is I just don't own many of them, and I'm not that floored by many of them, so that's why you're not going to see very many Euro game reviews on my channel. But despite that, there was a very deep discount on a game that I saw at Cool Stuff recently, so I decided to go ahead and pick it up because I had heard good things and I liked the theme, and that game is Euphoria: Build a Better Dystopia from Jamie Stegmaier and Alan Stone, who together formed Stonemaier Games. Get it? Now, this game has a very unique theme that I think is pretty cool, and there's a lot of post-apocalyptic themes, not just in board games, but in popular culture, media, video games, blah, blah, blah. This one suggests that the apocalypse has happened some time ago, society has been rebuilt, and in order to do away with all of the nasty things that happened in the past that might lead to another apocalypse, basically an elite group of a few people have taken control of society and are keeping all of the workers in a dystopia, which is to say that they're all basically just, they have no free will of their own, they're going through the motions just as complacent workers keeping the society going. Now, you as the players of this game, and this goes from 2 to 6 players, are amongst these working populace who have sort of awakened. You realize what was going on, you realize that you were being manipulated, that you were being basically thought controlled, and now, instead of running away from it all, you have decided, like any true tyrant in training, to try and take control of the society for yourself. Maybe for the benefit of the people that are toiling away, or maybe just because you want to be the one in power. That's up to you to decide. And how are you actually going to do this? Through worker placement, of course. So let's go ahead and go through the overview of the game, just a brief overview, because this game is heavy. I'm not going to be able to hit everything, I'll tell you that right now. Then we'll come back and I'll tell you whether it's my kind of Euro or not. Okay, folks, I'm just going to give you a very brief overview of Euphoria. When you actually get down to the game, it's not too complex, but there are a lot of little details to it. I don't have time to go over everything, so I'm just going to give you a very broad overview. Do not use this as a guide on how to actually play the game. Now, the theme of the game is that you're in a post-apocalyptic futuristic dystopia where the government keeps all of the workers underfoot. People are basically just slaves, mindless slaves wandering around doing their business. Each of the players represents one of these toilers who has actually sort of awoken. You've realized that you're in a dystopian government, but rather than run away off into the foothills to try and have a happy life, you've decided to make a play for power to gain control of the government. And whether or not you want this to be a noble gesture by trying to topple the government and put in and free everyone, or whether you just want to become meet the new boss same as the old boss, that's sort of up to you. Now, what this is mechanically is a worker placement game. At the start of the game, you're going to get a bunch of different colored player components. One of those are these dice. You actually have 4 dice, but you only start off with 2 in your available stock, and these represent your workers. They look pretty stylistic, but really what these are just dice numbered 1 through 6 that have little gear symbols on them. You'll also get this player board here, which is this is just a way to keep track of resources. So because there's a limited number of actual resource tokens, but the resources themselves are unlimited. If you have 3 of something, like for instance, if you have 3 water, you'll just put a token there representing 3, and so on. And you also get 10 of these stars in your color. Now, these are important because this is basically the victory condition. The first person to use all 10 of their stars and put them out on the board somewhere or on their cards is the winner. You're going to be able to put these out by meeting certain conditions. If you're part of building construction, you'll be able to put a star here. So let's say that this building is constructed and you had a worker there as part of it. You'll take back your worker that's built, boom, put a star there. You're one step closer to victory. You also get these recruits at the beginning of the game, and there's a whole stack of these recruits, a lot of different ones to choose from. These represent different people from different factions. They give you special abilities. You'll take 2 of these at the beginning of the game. One of them is face down and not quite active. The other one is face up and gives you their special ability. And there's a track here that continually moves up for each of the different factions. If it ever gets all the way to the end, and you have an agent of one of those factions up front available, flipped up, then you're actually able to put a star on one of those agents as well, and you're one step closer to victory. And there's a lot of other things that will give you the ability to put down stars as well. Now, just as an example, some of these agents you have here, Amanda the Broker. When your worker is bumped by another player's worker, you may give that player this sort of drug stuff. I forget what Bliss, I believe it's called. If you do, manually select your worker's knowledge instead of rolling it. That's one example. You have Kyle the Scavenger. When you place a worker on the generator, farm, or aquifer, if that worker is alone, you may gain 2 knowledge to draw an artifact. And so on and so forth. Let me show you one from a different faction, perhaps. Here we go. Julia the Thought Inspector. When your worker bumps another player's worker of equal knowledge, you may lose 2 morale to gain a resource. Now, there's resources and commodities in this game. The terminology can be kind of confusing, but commodities are sort of general ones, like you have water and you have food from the farm. Water is from the aquifer, food is from the farm, and you have electricity from the generator. But you also have these resources up here. So you've got wood and you've got stone, and you've got, which I guess is like gold. Those are different resources that you can have as well. Now, the difference here is that the commodities are mostly going to be used for some of the different spaces on the board. So for instance, if you want to build a new worker, you'll have to go over here and spend 3 energy. I know you can't quite see it, but 3 energy or 3 water, depending on whether or not you want to lose knowledge or gain morale. In another spot, if you can spend food here on the Wastelander track, you actually get to move this little worker meeple down the board. And if it ever gets, as it goes up, you're able to take either wood or artifact cards. Artifact cards are just sort of like random cards with images. Like these are like relics of the past non-dystopian government. Like there's a board game. This is actually the designer's previous board game, Viticulture, and a teddy bear and a book and a baseball bat. These are just set collections. Certain things that you're trying to do throughout the game, you're trying to turn in sets of artifacts. So for instance, if I had a worker in this space and this building was built, and I didn't have a star on that building, I would actually be able to go to this spot, turn in 3 artifact cards or 2 of the same artifact card, and I would be able to put one of my stars out there on the building. And this would also move up the Wastelander track. So you see, everything's sort of tied together, putting stars out, moving these tracks forward, and so on. Now, what's interesting about this is that not only is it helpful to put your to help take part in building a building in order to put your star on it, but if you don't have a star on it, negative things are going to happen to you. So for instance, the Academy of Mandatory Equality. If you do not have a star on this building after it is built, you may not use your recruit's special ability. So some of these can be very, very nasty. Another example, we have the Stadium of Guaranteed Home Runs. If you are not on this building, every time you roll a 5, you have to lose a commodity or a resource. Another example, the Center for Reduced Literacy. If you are not on this building, every time you roll a 6, you lose a commodity or a resource. So those can just get worse and worse as you go. Now, what I mean by actually helping to build it, you have these little icons here which indicate different resources necessary to build one of these. You can put your worker there, spend that particular resource if you happen to have it, and then your worker just stays there. Now, you can resummon that worker if you want, but it's usually better to leave it there because eventually other players are going to want to help you build it too. Or you can just make a shot if you have enough workers trying to build it yourself. But once all of these spots are filled and all of those resources are spent, then you get to flip this building over from the unconstructed side to the constructed side. The workers go away. This building actually slides over, and it opens up another worker placement slot to put more stars out on the board. If you spend a commodity, plus you get rid of a baseball artifact, you're able to put stars over in these little areas here, and these spaces will actually get blocked off if there's less players in the game, but it's yet another opportunity for you to put stars out on the board. You have a whole other section of worker placement up here, which represents the Icarite territory. This board is broken down into territories, and these do not have buildings that you can build, but they have spaces that are just always on that give you different opportunities to put stars out on the board or to gain more resources, like the Bliss. So you have Bliss over here. And I know this is kind of overwhelming, but the game is just full of choices. There are tons of different places you can put your workers, tons of things you can spend your commodities or your resources on, trying to accrue artifacts for certain activities, all with the goal of trying to put out as many of these stars as possible, as fast as possible, and be the first one to run out of stars. Now, one last thing I want to mention that actually has to do with the setup is these reference cards. Now, at the beginning of the game, each player gets a reference card. That's nothing new. That happens in a lot of different Euro games. You get a reference card detailing what some of the different resources do. But these actually have another side on the back that is random. And so, henceforth, these cards are actually dealt out randomly, and you keep it secret until it becomes necessary. On the back of these are actually ethical dilemmas. Now, on a certain given turn, you can actually, instead of putting out workers or resummoning all of your workers, you can actually spend your entire turn to use your ethical dilemma card. In order to do so, you have to either get rid of a particular artifact, which is pictured, or any 2 random artifacts. So, for instance, this one would require you to get rid of a teddy bear or 2 artifacts. Once you do that, give up your turn and sacrifice these artifacts, then you have to make a choice. You can either choose to do a noble action, or you can choose to do an ignoble action. So in this particular instance, you can either choose your true love or accept your assigned match. Now, these are all different. So, for instance, you have help a friend escape or turn in a friend. You have read a book or burn a book, and so on and so forth. The flavor of them is always different, but what the bonuses you get for either of those actions is always the same. If you choose a noble action, you get to draw 2 recruits and keep 1. Remember that recruits are the characters that you have, and you start the game with 2, but this would enable you to get more of them. The reason you would want to do that is because you'd have more special abilities to use, and if you happen to get an agent who is from a faction that's already all the way up on the track, you get to automatically put another star out on them. But if you choose to do the ignoble action, you just automatically get to place a star on this particular card, so you're one step closer to victory. So you have to make that choice if you decide to do the ethical dilemma. Do you want to gain the immediate benefit of putting a star out, or choose a potentially long-term benefit of having more agents to use? And that's basically Euphoria. Do your best to survive in this dystopian world, getting as many resources and commodities as possible, using your agents in the right way in order to put out your stars representing your influence and try to take over the dystopian government. Euphoria is my kind of Euro. I was pleasantly surprised by this game, and while I don't love it, I like it and I definitely appreciate it, and it'll probably stay in my collection because I need to have more Euros in my collection, especially those that I would actually be willing to play. Because there's a segment of my gaming group who only wants to play heavy, deep, strategic Euros. And I think that this is going to be a nice bridge between the games that I like to play and the games that those individuals like to play. But I'm getting ahead of myself, so let's work our way from the bottom to the top of this game. We're going to start with the components. The components of this game are strictly amazing. And I will actually say this, I probably should have said this during the intro, but I don't have the Kickstarter version of this game, I have the retail version of this game. The Kickstarter version of this game is even more pimped out than this one is. In that game, I mean, amongst the different types of things, the little resource gold bars that they have are actually metal. Not real gold, but it looks like gold. They have weight to them. Little things like that are just amazing. Doesn't really change the game fundamentally, but actually, from what I understand, if you can't already, then you will soon be able to, if you have the retail version, buy like an upgrade component pack to upgrade your normal version to the super pimped out version. But even on its own, even the normal retail version, it's awesome. There's just so many things. I mean, like a typical Euro, there's a lot of little wooden bits, but they're all crafted in different colors and look really unique. Like the water tokens, the little lightning bolts, the little head knowledge token that each player has, the heart token, and everything just looks so good. The little fruit tokens. I mean, the board is very busy, and I heard some people in the few games of this I played gripe about it because it was very busy. But it looks gorgeous. I mean, once you actually sit down and play and figure out where everything is, you kind of get past that and can appreciate how much artistic design went into the board, and little things, little touches, like how when you flip over a tile, when a tile is constructed and it slides over and opens another space, that kind of stuff is neat. I like that. Or how when you get to the end of the tunnel, you open up the blocked off space because your worker got to the end and died. But that kind of stuff is really cool and it really marries the theme with the components, with the mechanics of the game. And that is a fantastic thing that you are not going to see in very many Euros, at least as far as I can tell. And I'm, much like with City of Iron, which is on my shelf and is another my kind of Euro type game for me, it does a very good job of actually putting a theme onto what would probably be dry Euro-style mechanics in other types of games. So, love the artwork, presentation, and design of the components in this game. No complaints there whatsoever. Even the fact, I'm sorry, I don't want to go on about this too long, but even the fact that the typical rule summary or character reference card that you get on like almost every type of game, the fact that that's actually different and that you have your ethical dilemma on the other side, which we'll get back to in a minute, that's even very cool. So lots of good stuff to say about the components and presentation of this game. Rulebook is easy and simple. I liked it. They did a very good job with that. It's because the game is heavy. To me, it feels like a very heavy brain-burning game. And I've played other games where the rulebook is consequently as dense as the heaviness of the game implies. Not so in this case. It was very easy to follow because it's the one of the curses of being a new game reviewer and being the new game purchaser of the group, regardless of whether you're reviewing or not, that you're going to be playing a lot of new games. You don't always have time. I don't always have time to really study the rulebook ahead of time. The first time we played this, I had to just read from the rulebook. And it just made it, the fact that it was well designed and laid out, made it that much easier. No complaints there. The gameplay itself, I don't even know where to begin. Because like I said, it is heavy. There's so many cool elements to it. I really like the fact that your dice are not just the workers, but you have to roll them, and that determines their knowledge. It ties very well together with the theme of the game. I like the fact that that's tied directly to your. Well, it's not tied directly to it, although some things might do it. But that you also have the morale track that is going to give you more hand size, but you might have to sacrifice morale when you take back your workers because you're, again, thematically, you're forcing your workers to do your bidding and taking them back, or whatever you're theoretically doing with them, killing them maybe, and it's making them lose morale. And if your knowledge gets too high, then you might lose workers because they run away. That kind of stuff works really, really well. The different spaces on the board. It's, I would say, one of the big problems with this game, and it's a problem depending on who you are and how used you are to this kind of game, I should say. And for me, it's a problem, again, because this isn't typically my type of game, but the plethora of choices that you have can be very overwhelming. I was going to say just the first time you played, but I played it 3 times, and it's still overwhelming because even you have your agent cards. I think that's what they're called, the agent cards, who your recruits that will kind of determine how you want to go about the game. Because obviously, if you have a recruit of the Wastelanders, you're going to want to move that Wastelander track up at some point. And that can kind of determine how you're going to focus things. Because if you're moving the Wastelander track up, you might take more of whatever resource they have, which is, I think, is like the boxes or something. And so that might determine your path. But still, there's so many other good things you can be doing. You might want to focus on just doing the Sky Realm, for instance, but are you really going to ignore all of those construction spaces that other players are getting in on and opening up, and not just putting a star on, which is the goal of the game, getting rid of those stars ultimately, but also screwing you by flipping over a construction tile that you're not a part of, that you didn't take part of the construction on? It's doing this really awful negative thing. Some things you can live with. Some things are really bad. And then you're playing catch up just to put a star on there so you're not screwed for the rest of the game. That's harsh. A lot of people are not going to like that. And in fact, I talked to a couple of Euro gamers who either played this game and didn't like it, or didn't want to play it because of those kind of elements, because of the kind of screw you elements that are possible from doing that. The fact that you could sort of block people off from even taking part of the construction. If you have multiple types of resources and you see that another player has only one type of resource and they want to go for that building, you take it first. And that's one of the locked spots that no one can bump you from. And that's because I think that people don't like that, because, especially heavy Euro gamers, because there's not supposed to be that much interaction in a lot of different Euro games. It's very uncommon. And even though I still wouldn't call this direct player conflict, it definitely is more interaction, in a negative way if you're on the receiving end of it, and some people are not gonna like that. But these are just more choices that you have. Do you go for artifacts? Do you want to go for the artifact route? The ethical dilemma, another important decision in the game. Do you go for the easy star, or do you hope that you can get another recruit and get more, and therefore have access to more? You know, maybe you grab another recruit from a completely different faction and therefore have access to more of the different types of commodities, or you can get the second bonus, which is both a artifact and a resource when you go down the tunnel or use the tunnel action. Those are kind of, or do you just go for another recruit of this faction that you have, knowing that that's going to get you a star as well? There's a lot of cool stuff in this game. A lot of things that really work thematically. Problems with the game, like I said, it can be very heavy. It can be very overwhelming. Some people are not going to like the screw you elements. The board is very busy. There's a lot of different options. I also think the game is longer than the box purports to be, which is no surprise. Most games do that. And I also think that I've played this with 5 players, and it was way too long, and I cannot fathom playing it with 6. This is definitely falling into the area of the maximum player syndrome, where this is not a good game to play with the maximum number of players. Just because they give you that option does not mean you should do it, and I don't recommend it personally. And overall, again, I'm not a huge Euro gamer. I probably would have liked more direct conflict in this game. I would have liked there to be even more thematic elements. It was almost a tease with the amount of theme that's in this game as far as the whole knowledge thing and the workers and the recruits. I wanted more of that. I want to see more from this universe, and this game sort of stopped at a certain point because it could only do so much with the type of mechanics that it has. So that's why I said I don't necessarily love the game, because it's just not in my wheelhouse. But I was, again, I'll say I was pleasantly surprised by it. I think that if you like worker placement games, if you can deal with some of the randomness of the die rolls and the recruit cards, things like that, in the direct player conflict, or if you just want to change the pace because you've been playing the same kind of Euro games and worker placement games, give this one a shot. It's got a lot of good buzz, and I think there's a good reason for it, and it's just a beautiful game. So I like it. I do recommend it. My name is Nick. This has been Board Game Brawl, and I'm reminding you to get out there and game every day in every way. Take care.